Epic have issued an ultimatum to Valve, we have a massive microtransaction controversy, and the financial results of Nintendo and Sony. Results that very much show what direction the industry is moving in. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the second roundup of the week. This is our twice per week show that keeps you up to date with all of the important gaming news, so be sure to hit that sub button. And man, we have quite the episode today, so let's just open with a strong one. We've got Tim Sweeney. So Tim Sweeney is the CEO of Epic, and he really seems to be the sort of fellow that's just happy to place faith in his spreadsheets and let the ensuing drama wash over him. Well, he recently said something pretty darn major. Here's the quote: "If Steam committed to a permanent 88% revenue share for all developers and publishers without major strings attached, Epic would hastily organize a retreat from exclusives while honoring our partner commitments and consider putting our own games on Steam." That's quite the thing to say. Like, that is massive, isn't it? And on the face of things, it really does seem like this means Epic pretty much just only care about the 88% split and the developer side of things, and really that Tim tweeted this in order to take the high ground in the conversation. And I actually do think that's partially true, but I think there's actually a good bit more to it than that. You see, Valve and Epic run their stores differently. First, payment providers. For some payment providers with higher fees, Epic passes that cost on to the customer. Now, this will not hit most Western customers, but it's a major factor for many customers. Valve eat those costs within their higher revenue share, so there is one fundamental difference there. Past that, Valve, well, they do have more features in their store, so presumably they would have higher store upkeep. They just have more features, more stuff going on, although I'll admit that stuff's pretty hard to measure. Not the extra stuff, the cost of it. Then past that, it's also true that Valve have far more third-party key activations than Epic do, meaning that, well, there are more games being activated on Steam that, have all that burden associated with them without Valve getting any money. Yeah, devs can sell Steam keys via Green Man Gaming, and Valve won't get any money with their Steamworks platform services and all that stuff being for free. But of course, with the game still being for sale on Steam, which somewhat, eats into their revenue. Now, the cost over all of that stuff is fairly negligible, as there's no store side customer service or payment processing, and CDN costs are normally pretty darn small, but it is an important difference. Valve probably could be able to afford 88%, but if you look closely, Epic are at just over 50% profitability on their 12%, but their business model is designed around that split. It's hard to know if Valve could make 12% work across the board. Look, as a dev, I would be fine giving up a few more percent on the split in order for, my users to have Steam's features, right? So if Valve opened up their 20% tier to indies, I think that would be a great middle ground, but obviously not enough to meet Tim's tweet, and I think that is why Tim tweeted it. I think he almost certainly knows that Valve will not be able to quickly move over to an 88% split, meaning that tweet for him is just a free PR win for everyone who takes it at face value, when I really do think there are important things underlying the two different stores, which mean that, Valve doing 88% right now would be a lot of work. They'd have to change a bunch of stuff. That's just not something that Epic really have as a concern. Therefore, Valve almost lose by default to his tweet, I think, without examining the other things that are going on with those stores. So no, this probably doesn't mean that we're going to see the Epic exclusives go away anytime soon. I think Tim very much tweeted that knowing that Valve wouldn't do it and that the exclusives would continue. Okay, next up, the Mortal Kombat situation. This is a bit of a strange one. So there was a massive amount of pre-launch worry, extremely rightly so. There was a very frustrated tweet from the game's director and series founder that was just a bit embarrassing and full of emojis. And then there's the ongoing debate over the microtransaction store that actually did ship with the game. One thing is very much for sure here, though, in my view. The practice of not having a game store be active on review copies is just terrible. And it's a consistent thing that keeps on happening, with stores often being added in after the fact and often being worse than you would initially think. Just look what happened to the complete hellscape that is Call of Duty Black Ops 4. Now, Mortal Kombat did that. It did not have a store on its review copies. Now, it also is a very contrived game. I think it has 4 currencies that tie its various modes together. Now, it's totally something that you can learn in 20 minutes, but it's still pretty darn silly having a game be that contrived. And what's worse is that often when games are that contrived with all their currencies, well, that stuff exists because of a storefront. Often grinds and currencies are there because a developer has created a problem that they can sell you the solution for. And that's exactly what people first saw with Mortal Kombat 11. First, there are challenge towers that are balanced to be very hard, potentially being overtuned. I believe there's a patch coming to sort of fix up that stuff, but that was to the point where players would need consumables. Now, the thing is, those consumables cost currency that seemed pretty darn expensive. Then there's the dungeon crawler mode called the Crypt that acts as one of the game's primary reward sources. Contrary to initial reporting, it actually does have fixed non-RNG drops, but it still costs coins to open the chests that you find within the Crypt. And what made all of this stuff worse is that people saw all these currencies, they saw all this terrible balancing, they saw how low the acquisition rates were, and because of this, and the conspicuously offline store on the review copies, people, I think, rightly assumed the worst, that these currencies would all be purchasable in the store. Well, as it turns out, that's not the case for the gameplay affecting currencies, but you can purchase time crystals, which is the game's premium currency, from the store. Now, these time crystals are used to purchase skins in the store, with the store's contents rotating every 24 hours. Now, this game, I think it has about 700 skins. Now, that's to the point where it would cost over $6,000 to purchase all of them with time crystals, although that would require you to constantly be logging into the store with every single rotation. And I think just the sheer absurdity of that number is really what got headlines. And I think rightly so. It's just wild to have a single game ship with $8 grand of potential, or sorry, $6+ grand of potential purchases in it. Now, the developer said that, the time crystals are earned through gameplay as well, and that the store's, the usual type of time saver thing. And that is true, but let's be real, it's just selling a solution they created, and the store, it's there to show people a new set of purchases they could buy every day. It's there to get those compulsive whale-like sales. All sales is manipulation, that's fine, we all agree to it, but I think sometimes we can all also agree that a company's just trying a bit too hard, pushing the boat a bit too much. So even without the initial consumables microtransaction worries, I still think the store is a bit silly, and I think it's another example of a bad trend. And it's just something we're going to see continuing over time, getting worse and worse, to the point where, yeah, I'm worried about the state of games in 10 years. How much closer will PC and console games be to the monetization of their current-day mobile counterparts? I'm not Nostradamus, but I think we can all be pretty darn sure publishers want to bring as much of that over from mobile onto PC as they can. Just that, on PC, they'll probably also charge you $60 for the privilege. Now, it is important to say that they do have an update planned. I think they're giving everyone about $10 worth of the time crystal currency, and they're rebalancing a bunch of stuff. We'll have to see if that works, but I think the fundamental points here still do stand, and yeah, I think $10 of free time crystals is not going to get people to change on their principles. Next up, an Apex Legends update. So Apex has really struggled to maintain its viewership, and it has been massively outpaced by Epic's Fortnite in terms of content production. Many people have been a bit worried about this, maybe even puzzled about it. I think understandably so, given how the development process is really a black box from the consumer's perspective. They shouldn't really have to think about how it actually happens. It's really just they're there for the product. Now, as we recently covered, though, Fortnite's insane content update schedule has resulted in a lot of crunch and burnout, and you can check out the video on that, but EA responded with their response being pretty darn telling. Their response was clearly aware of the recent Polygon article that exposed Epic's working conditions. EA's post talks about their commitment to the health of their team and to anti-crunch culture. It seems like that commitment is being backed up with a slow pace of content. That means it actually does seem kind of genuine, though of course EA studio BioWare had similar massive problems to Epic with its crunch and all of that, though I think a lot of that blame falls on BioWare more so than EA once you actually look into the specifics. Now moving on, Respawn have acknowledged that Season 1 of Apex was not really the most hype thing in the universe. Respawn have teased that we will learn more about Season 2 at EA Play, saying that we can expect all the usual things from the new season, like new weapon and new character, but also they tease changes to the game's map. Overall, they just seem to be committing to seasonal updates and a long-term game plan. And I think that's totally the right thing to do, and I really do wonder how much of that game's core even competes with Fortnite. Yeah, when the hype was massive, people moved over from Fortnite, streamers moved over, but once that died down, I just can't imagine that the Venn diagram between hardcore Fortnite players and hardcore Apex players overlaps that much. I think for the older core audience of Apex, those seasonal updates are probably pretty pretty effective. And I think the weekly updates, they maybe are just more tailored for the younger Fortnite audience, like on mobile and that kind of thing. Finally then, Respawn did say that they've pushed back their other Titanfall games in order to better support Apex. And that's a bit sad to hear because I really love the Titanfall games, but I think it probably is good for the health of their teams. I think it's pretty clear that Respawn is a highly effective group, and they seem to respect their teams enough to not burn them into the ground. And frankly, a future Titanfall game that is developed smoothly would probably be better than one that barely makes it into existence, as the studio is torn between it and Apex. So it seems like they're actually really taking the sensible, mature, long-term plan, which is a pretty darn good thing to hear. Then next, we have the financial performance of Nintendo and Sony. Now, I've got to be straight up here. I'm mostly going off Daniel Ahmed's commentary here. Now, look, the guy, he's the same age as me, and he's made senior analyst at what seems to be a pretty major firm. So, yeah, on this one, I'm going to defer to the experts. So, Sony have reached 96.8 million PS4 sold, with their game and network service revenue soaring, having its most profitable year ever. And it's quite insane when you look at this graph. I mean, just look at the revenue pie chart. You really can see how massive digital and services are for Sony. And it's pretty funny as compared to Nintendo's, but we're going to see more on them later. So Sony have also increased their R&D spend, which of course does make sense given the new console that they have in the way, and they're now at 36.5 million paid PS Plus subscriptions and 700,000 PS Now users. Again, it's all about that service revenue. And to put it bluntly, Sony are doing fantastically. They have leveraged their large platform with effective services and a widely used store, allowing them to perform at record levels. Then finally, they have confirmed that there will not be a console release within the next 12 months, meaning that we likely are looking at a Q3, Q4 release date next year for the PlayStation 5. Okay, moving over to Nintendo. Again, you can see that the Switch is roughly keeping pace with the PS4 in terms of relative sales months since release. And that's something that's pretty darn impressive given the competition of the market today, the lower price points of everything today, although it is fair to say that the Switch is a pretty darn unique bit of kit. Now, Nintendo have also had 95% year-over-year digital growth. It's still tiny as compared to Sony, but it's growing rapidly. And then overall, you can see that the Switch is 86% of Nintendo's business. And, like with Sony, they made great hardware, they've made great games, and it's kind of nice to see that that's actually working out for them. Their first-party releases have been selling tremendously well, with the most recent Smash being the fastest selling fighting game ever. They also confirmed no hardware announcements at E3, so those other Switch SKUs that we thought were coming are probably a bit further down the line. And really, when we look at all of this, what does it tell us? Well, I think it tells us that digital is massive. It's the way forward. Just look what it's done for Sony. And look, we've talked about it for death, but I think just when you see the numbers about how effective it is, and again, for reasons we've already covered, it's just pretty darn clear they want to have stuff on their own storefront. They want their own service revenue. That's really what everyone's going to be trying to push more and more as time goes on. And of course, you just have to look at the Xbox One SAD, the Xbox One online only or digital only edition, which of course is, digital only by its very nature and will be driving a lot of those digital sales and those services like Game Pass. So we really just see everyone is acknowledging that digital is basically where the most profit is to be made. But anyway, that is it for the news roundup. I think super interesting, deep topics today. A lot to get into, and I'd love to hear what you think about all of them. So let me know in those comments down below. Thank you very much for supporting this channel, and with that, I'll see you next time.